Let's have a look at Kirsty Nicole Hadley, who, Kirsty, you believe that phones actually empower students and provide a little cocoon, a safety net for children, so bless them. There's me thinking they went to school to learn, but you think they're there to fiddle on their phones. Tell us more, Kirsty.
Okay, so it's not a case of them fiddling on their phones. I think that these kind of blanket bans always affect children with special educational needs disproportionately, okay? And I'm part of a campaigning group called Send Reform England, and this is the type of thing that we are talking about all the time, because this isn't just our kids needing to, it would be nice if we could reach home, but they're not just anxious, they're like traumatized by school. And I think especially when it comes to autistic ADHD kids, due to budget cuts in schools, lack of training around autism or ADHD, and, you know, lack of resources, this isn't always, you know, our kids don't always feel safe at school. And I think there has actually been sort of quite a breakdown of trust between the parents.
Kirsty, sorry for interrupting, but where would you stand on those particular children, their needs being catered for, but they would be the exception rather than the rule? Where do you stand on that?
It's a tricky one, because I think that as soon as we put a blanket ban in place, right, we're building a culture of mistrust with the children. And my knee-jerk reaction would always be to say that there's a huge difference between being told what to do and deciding what to do yourself. And I think that we should be working with kids to arm them with the tools they need to make good decisions. You know, like treat them a bit more like adults instead of kids.
Yeah, unfortunately, we do have to tell you that we could bring in our former headmaster at this stage, but we've just lost the connection to him. So we're all with you, Kirsty, so far the whole way.
So tell us a bit more about your child. So how did they find school? And were they ringing you? Were they texting you throughout the school day? How would that help them, having their phone on them?
Okay, so my child had the transition from junior school to senior school last September, and I think that is such a huge sort of disruption with regards to their regulation and their learning and their friendship groups, and I don't think we're always prepared for what a huge transition that is. And my child was in school from September to December, and then was completely burned out and couldn't go to school at all for 4 months.
Wait a minute, sorry, is there something different about your child? Forgive me if I'm not aware of this. I mean, we've all done the transition, so we've all come through it. So what have you got to tell us, Kirsty?
Thank you, Raymond, for reminding me about that. Yeah, so Sunny, my child, is autistic ADHD, and I am ADHD autistic. So there are sort of, it's a harder transition. Changes are hard for neurodivergent brains, and that change in particular is very, very unsettling. So I think it's for a lot of children that have special educational needs, that safety blanket of knowing their phone is there just in case they need to contact home is the thing that will get them through the gates in the first place. So for Sunny, full-time in school, September to December, burnt out for 4 months, no school whatsoever, which is, you know, a nightmare for everybody concerned. And now Sunny is going to school one day a week, but they need to be able to contact me on the phone. So it's a godsend. They wouldn't be in school if it wasn't for the fact they could take their phone with them.
We're delighted to say we've got Chris back, Kirsty, so I don't know how much of your argument or whatever he heard, but Kirsty was basically saying, Chris, that if you take phones away from kids, it creates a culture of mistrust, and there's certain kids that need the security blanket of knowing that they can get in touch with their parents if they needed to, so they can decide rather than the teachers. What would you say to that?
Well, as a head teacher, I banned phones about 15 years ago, but the children could bring the phones to the office, leave it in the school office. It wasn't a problem. Part of the issue we had was that children were getting mugged, bringing their phones to school. They're getting mugged on the underground in London and so forth. You know, you've just been talking about, on the programme a few minutes ago, about climate change. Well, let me worry you even more. There's something called mind change. That's the title of a book by a very eminent brain scientist, Baroness Greenfield, the director of the British Institution in the past. She's pointed out that although we don't know the consequences yet, this addiction to digital technology is actually affecting the brains, and you can see it, you can photograph it, and it's reducing empathy, it's reducing interpersonal skills. We don't know the long-term consequences, so that's a real problem. And also, you know, Eamon, it's really interesting that in the Sunday Times has reported this. If you go to Silicon Valley in California, the bosses of the computer companies who produce the phones and the software, they are increasingly sending their own children to what are called Waldorf schools, which ban digital technology altogether. So if the drug pusher, and these mobile phones are sort of educational cocaine, if the drug pusher is not using these phones for their own children, then you understand there's a problem.
Yeah. And Kirsty was telling us the problem that she has with her child in terms of conditions, and I think everybody can empathise with that and understand that. So whilst there may be exceptions for certain pupils, there's certainly no need, Chris. I mean, it's chaos for every kid in the class. We can understand the exceptions, but for every kid in the class to have a phone, really, it would make a teacher's life very difficult, I would have thought.
Absolutely. It's a distraction. Of course, children on their phones. I was listening to one of the members of the UN yesterday who was saying it could take 20 minutes on average for children to settle down if they've got phones. They text each other. They also film the teachers and put that on YouTube. So it can be quite destructive. And also they're bullying each other in the classroom. There are always exceptions. I mean, I'm not a person who, you know, is absolutely hard and cruel on this. I mean, children who are in special needs may need a phone. I understand that. But as I said, you can leave the phone at the school office. But on the whole, there's a real danger in the growth and the addiction to this habit of using phones, and it's damaging learning. The countries where standards are highest have very moderate use of digital technology. Digital technology is very important. These phones are having a bad impact. I welcome the fact that United Nations, 15 years after the campaign for real education, which is quite quick by today's standards, are saying we should get rid of these phones in classrooms, or we should control the use of them. So that's good. A bit late in the day, but we should welcome it. Now we need more of a lead from our own government.
I want to ask you about what Chris just mentioned there about addiction and addiction to phones. I mean, is that something that you worry about with your child, Sonny, the impact of that potential addiction on education, but also on relationships as well?
Well, you know, I would argue the opposite, because I think that particularly in the pandemic, we saw how valuable technology was and our digital devices were for nurturing friendships and keeping those going. And I think we're always afraid of change. You know, it's the human way to be afraid of change, but we do live in a modern world. And I think that we need to incorporate tech into the classroom. And like I said, we have to be arming our children with the tools and the knowledge to make good decisions themselves. Like, we know that children are rebellious. It's part of growing up. Like, we have to be able to teach them about the damages that can happen to their brain with overuse. Like anything, you know, it's like everything in moderation. But just telling them, I think by banning and telling kids this is bad, that's going to make them go the opposite way. We've got to arm them with the tools and the facts and the knowledge to make these decisions themselves. And a lot of the rules that get made in school, of course, are better for the teachers. And teachers have a really hard job. My God, I could not be a teacher. But, you know, I think sometimes you've got to play the long game with this stuff. And with regards to bullying, bullies are going to bully whether they've got phones or not. You've got to get to the root of that problem. Banning phones isn't going to stop someone bullying.